Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love talking to creative people. I get very inspired by it. It helps me kind of stay inspired about my own stuff, and I love to hear about the ups and downs of all of it. And today my guest is a theater director named Bart DeLorenzo. He's a fixture on the Los Angeles theater scene. I've seen so many shows that he has directed. When I started looking at his credits, I was like, oh, I saw that. His new show that he's directed is the Noel Coward play Design for Living at the Odyssey Theatre ensemble here in LA. And I got to see one of the first shows, one of the opening night performances, and it's really modern in its storytelling. Like, it's this story about three people who just decide after various combinations of couples within them, they're like, maybe the three of us should just be together. Like, it's very thematically progressive and kind of audacious and subversive. And I was curious about Noel Coward wrote it in like the 30s, and here we are doing it today. And so I was excited to talk to Bart about the play, but also just his whole career as a theater director in Los Angeles. What's that like? So I really enjoyed our conversation. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that this podcast, Dennis Anyone, is brought to you by me. I do it because I love it. It brings me a lot of joy and fulfillment. It makes me feel connected to things. I'm super into it. But it, costs a little time and a little money. So if you want to support that, I would appreciate it. There are some things you can do. You can go to DennisAnyone.net and you can donate to my virtual tip jar there. There's also a link there called Buy Me a Coffee, where you just kind of buy me a coffee. And I love that. It's a newer thing that I've happened upon, and it's fun. You get, for the price of a coffee, you can say, hey, thanks, I love that interview. And then I get to enjoy a delicious coffee, which is always nice. All right. The other thing you can do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows under the Derek and Romaine banner. And for a monthly fee, you get my show early and you get all these other great LGBTQ shows. So learn about that at dnrstudios.com. All right. Here now is my interview with theater director Bart DeLorenzo. Joining me now from Los Angeles, it's theater director and artistic director of the Evidence Room Theater. It's Bart DeLorenzo. Welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here.
I was looking through your bio and I was like, I saw that.
Wow.
Like so many shows that I've seen over the years. I love going to theater in LA, and I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody who's directed as much of it. So I want to talk to you generally about that kind of endeavor. But first, we're going to talk about the play that just went up at the Odyssey Theatre, Noel Coward's Design for Living. I had never seen this play before, and it's very provocative. It's very shocking. First of all, just talk about
1932. Can you believe it?
It was written in 1932. So can you just describe a little bit about the story so people know what is provocative about it?
Sure. Well, it's about three young artists, all friends, but they're much more than friends. They're completely obsessed with each other, living in Paris in the 1930s, inseparable and struggling financially, but having a blast. And they're hitting that age when society is pushing them to settle down and live a normal life. And they kick and scream and express themselves and fight for their liberation and love. I think this is one of the earliest 20th century plays to explore like living alternatively, both personally and sexually. And I thought that it would be really fun to look at it now through a more contemporary lens.
Sometimes when you watch a romantic movie, you're like, those two should be together. And this time I'm watching, those three should be together. Like, they should, without one of them, it's not right. It's the three of them should be together. Was the play banned originally?
Apparently, yeah, it was, the play, kind of premiered on Broadway with Noel Coward himself playing one of the roles. They actually previewed it at the Cleveland Playhouse, not Cleveland Playhouse, in Cleveland, in what is now Playhouse Square. And then they did it in New York. And then it took 6 years for it to come to London because, London had some kind of very serious censorship in the theater, really up until the mid-'60s.
Wow. Well, the triangle is two men and a woman, and you express it quite physically with kissing, and you get the feeling that they've been in that bedroom backstage, and and all of it. What were the parts that you brought to it, and then how did it play at the time? Was it everything was sort of between the lines, and you were able to be more show more than they could back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think Noel Coward. I've become, I've read so many of his plays, and when I started working on this play, I started, I did a deeper investigation into his diaries and his letters and his short stories. And his short stories were clearly written for two audiences at the same time. It's written for a general public. And then they're also very deeply coded pieces of writing. That if you know what's going on, there's another story going on, which perhaps your grandmother would not see. And I think this play was like that as well. He drops all the clues in the play, but I think if you were a different sort of person in the 1930s, you might not notice what he's put into the play. So I just felt that I could reveal what was in the play. I didn't think I pulled anything out. It was there. I mean, in the original production of the play, Noel Coward plays Leo, who's he's just had an affair the night before with this woman that he loves, and he's sleeping in the next room in the first act. And I've seen pictures of the original production, and Noel Coward comes out of the bedroom in a double-breasted suit with a perfect tie and a pocket square.
Right.
And I don't know of people who do that.
It's not exactly the freshly effed look that we're, used to from our own lives. But you do it differently. He comes out in an undershirt and boxers, and clearly there's been intimacy happening in that next room.
Yeah.
It's funny, Noel Coward, you think of him and you think of champagne and tuxedos and wit, and the music that you use is all Noel Coward songs. But underneath it, he's exploring these really kind of subversive ideas of we should just be able to do what we want in this life. Why are we buying into all of these conventions? Can you talk a little bit about why that idea spoke to you, and if that is indeed the idea that you're hoping that people might take away?
Yeah, I mean, I read in Noel Coward's his lover Graham Payne's autobiography that he said that this was Noel Coward's favorite play, and I think because it is just because his plays are hilarious and witty and fun, and this is like that. But I think in this play, he's writing about something that's really important to him. He's kind of predicting his own life in this play, because he's in his early 30s when he writes this play, and I think he is trying to figure out how he is going to live, because I don't think he can imagine himself living a conventional life. Supposedly, he thought a lot about the writer Somerset Maugham, who was also a very successful playwright of the previous generation, and they were friends and they spent some time together. But I think he knew he didn't want that life; he wanted a different life, and so he's trying to figure it out. And this is in this play, he's sort of working through something that strangely becomes very predictive of the kind of life that he will live, in which he has this alternative family moving around the world in these different houses, but always this family that he has created. And I think I don't know if you know, but I'm also a teacher. I teach at California Institute of the Arts, and I've been doing that for 10 years now, and I love it. I love the young people, and the way they keep me on my toes, and their shocking and opinions and ideas and things, and I have noticed this I don't even know this tension to be a certain way. I am this, so I represent that.
Right. Really tying into certain identities.
Yes. And I feel like so many of my students, it feels like they're running for Congress, that they have.
Yeah. They have a platform. They have a brand.
Exactly. I mean, of course, that makes sense. I mean, I blame Facebook and all of the other social media for these things.
Right.
But I think Noel Coward is saying, I know what you are or what you think you are, but who cares?
Right.
Live your life. Be inconsistent. Make mistakes. Make a mess of your life, but have it be your delicious mess. And I think that's what the play is celebrating.
I love the term delicious mess. That feels like a song. Also in this play, until the three of them own the dynamic, they're miserable. They're making a delicious mess out of everything. I understand that he wrote this on a boat and finished it outside of Los Angeles. That's kind of a cool Noel Coward bit of trivia.
Yeah. He was not childhood, but when he was just beginning his career, he was sort of a child star. And then he traveled in London, and then he traveled to New York and was like, I'm going to make it big here, and kind of failed miserably. And he really couldn't find a place for himself. But he's in his early 20s, and he befriends this couple, young actors, Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, and they, would in his autobiography, he talks about, them buying a pint of potato salad, and that's their night, that they would sit around a table and talk about these glorious futures that they were going to have. And then he goes back to London, and then in the next 10 years, he becomes a huge, he writes material that stars himself, and he becomes a huge star in London. They find these great roles in New York, and they become big stars. And so he gets a telegram from them. I love the 1930s.
I love a telegram. I love a telegram moment. Yeah.
Especially when you're on a boat. So he gets a telegram on a boat where they say that they will be released from their theater guild contracts for a couple of months. Does he have anything? And so he's on the boat, traveling around the Horn of South America, and he starts writing, and he clearly dives into his own autobiography, and according to his book, he finishes just as the lights of Los Angeles are twinkling in the distance, and they're waiting to dock. And then he arrives and sends them the play, and they all find a way to do it.
That's so beautiful to think, because you're on the West LA. That's where the theater is, not far probably from where he showed up with this finished play. So he was going to play the third character with Lunt Fontaine. Do you think they were intimate? Do you think that they had any kind of like that dynamic? Do we know anything about that part of his life?
It's impossible to know. It's about love, not just sex. I mean, it's funny. I people who have come to see the play talk to me about that movie Challengers from this year.
Yeah.
And what has been intimate between the three of them? And it's been intimate. I don't know exactly what positions people have gotten into, but it's very, very intimate. And there is an obsession with each other. And that's what this play is about. And we don't have to get into the details of what body part touch which body part,
Right. It's the emotional connection and the desire and the obsession, and like it's really, really powerful. You mentioned Cal Arts. When I was in high school, I got a brochure for Cal Arts. Mm-hmm. And I was growing up in a small town in Arizona. I was going to go to a state school. Like but that place seemed like a dream. Like there was dance on the first floor and acting on the second floor. And like, it felt like the famed school for college. And I would daydream about Cal Arts. Is it like that?
It is 100% like that.
Really? People are doing numbers at the lunchroom and stuff?
Yes. But they're not just doing numbers. They're doing like crazy performance art.
Amazing.
And a photo series on the walls of people, exploring their own bodies, and then there's like a impromptu string quartet. And it is, I remember when I first started there, I just it blew my mind. And I think I'm just so used to it now, I probably don't even notice it. But yes, it is as creative a space as I have ever seen in my life.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to know that. And it also seemed like you didn't have to just pick one thing. Like there seemed to be mingling between all of the different disciplines. Do you teach directing there? What kind of classes do you teach?
No, I teach a couple different things. I teach all of the first year MFA students in theater from every discipline: actors, directors, designers, producers, stage managers, technical directors. I teach all of them in a class where we meet. I have two wonderful colleagues, and we teach them how do you have a script in your hand. What do you do? And it's like how to approach interpreting, understanding, and exploring a play, because the text is the ground on which we meet. And then recently, I have been directing the graduating students in their showcase to present them to be distributed around the world in all their artistic endeavors. So those are the two things that I teach right now.
What surprised you about teaching and being in that environment?
Well, I'll just say the cliche is that the teacher learns as much as the students do. I rely on them to teach me every year. And I've taught during a very interesting period of years. The other thing that really surprised me is how much it changes from year to year. There is, each class has a personality. And there is, it's so funny. When I lived in Venice, I used to, either go for a run or a walk, depending on my feelings at sunset every day. And I was always curious. It's like, are there a whole bunch of red sunsets and then there are purpley sunsets and then there are orangey sunsets? No, every day nature starts from scratch.
It's not a gradient. It's like all new every day.
It's all new every day. And I feel like graduating classes are like that. They have a feeling because it's a different chemistry that has put them together. And they're responding to society and culture and the historical moment and everything. And so they're very different from year to year. There are trends, but even the trends disappear. A trend will last for a few years, and then there'll be something else. And the references are very different. And so it's just how different they are, And I feel so grateful that I have such a deep and constantly changing understanding of the world because of them,
I host this game that I created with friends, a friend of mine, and we do in-person game nights and sometimes a lot of virtual game nights. I did a game night recently for a group of college students, and it was the first time I would spent time around like 21-year-olds, and it was like, oh, these guys, they haven't had the crap beat out of them yet. Like, it was just something so poignant about it and wonderful and like exciting. And one of them they had a project. Three of them got together and they're going to do a side project and they showed their PowerPoint. And I was like, you guys go for it. Go, like, being around that sort of, I guess it's idealism or just like, it felt nice. It felt like a balm, I guess, to my more jaded parts. What's it like being around that youth, that people that haven't, had the ups and downs quite yet?
Well, it's interesting because, they sometimes, I'm always like, I know I shouldn't be shocked. This is like an old person's comment about, the history that they don't know sometimes. Yeah. I won't even tell you, about a class a few years ago where some of them didn't know who won World War II. So I'm going to just jump over that. But especially these recent classes, they've been through a lot, you know?
They have actually.
I didn't go through a pandemic in my childhood, and they've grown up in in a world filled with terrorism, which I didn't grow up in, or I didn't really I didn't really think about it much. I guess I was afraid of the atomic bomb, but
Right.
I didn't really I didn't deal with that. But then they didn't, they don't know as much about AIDS as perhaps someone of my generation does. And it's just different.
It's just different.
It's just different. I mean, the traumas are different. And I thank God I didn't have social media during my college years because, and I stayed away from it. Thank God I haven't gotten curious. I mean, that just seems really, really hard.
Yeah.
Really, really hard for that generation. So
I agree. You talk a bit about, in relation to your teaching, about your process and how you start with the script. What do you do first? You're going to direct a play. What's the first thing you do?
It's so funny because I have a whole class devoted to this subject. And
I'm very curious about this happens and then this happens and this, and I'm sure it's different with different directors, but I'm curious about your process.
Because in the class, we go week by week. I teach with the wonderful Mona Heinze and Daniel Alexander Jones. And we all talk about different approaches and all of this. But on my first lecture, I say, okay, this class teaches lots of different things, but you want to know the real way I do it? I just read the play over and over and over and over and over again. You can't imagine how many times I read the play. And then I'll have conversations about things that interest me in the play, and then I'll read more about the source material, and I'll do research, and then I'll read the play again, and then I'll listen to music, and then I'll read the play again, and then I'll find something that interests me, and then I'll read the play again. And so it's really, really diving in and deepening my knowledge of the play. Before I do any analysis, before I start breaking anything down, I just really want to know what this beast is. Mm-hmm. And then and then of course, when I dive in with the actors, they bring so many things that I had never even considered. Right. That it causes another deep dive. But a play like this, which is a historical play, there's so much just to look at other things. I mean, I look at everything. I look at the art of the time, the music of the time, Noel Coward's friends. I have so many Noel Coward books. I could line them all up here and you could see them. I just read it and read it and read it.
Do you end up making a ton of notes? Is there a binder involved? Are we using highlighters? I'm curious about the office supplies.
Oh, that's funny. You know what I do? I try to keep every passing thought I have in a single document. I mean, I do collect books and articles and
sure.
Images. I collect a lot of images. I'm very drawn to images. As is the set designer that I've worked with quite a lot. She is extraordinary with images. But I try to keep a single Word document that I just keep throwing things into, either important ideas that I feel need to come out in the play, or observations I've made, or like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and I keep that so that I can return to it, because you forget, because you go on a journey, an adventure as you are thinking about things. And like, you forget, like the end of the play I was very unsure about how I would do the end of the play, because, I've read, I do research. I read reviews of other productions of it because I'm just curious how it came off. And quite often people respond to the meanness of the ending. And I did not want to have a mean ending at all.
It felt like a happy ending to me.
That's what I'm so glad to hear that, because that's what I'm hoping for. But trust me, if you read some reviews, you will see that it often ends up a very kind of smug and self-satisfied ending. And I really, really didn't want to do that. And so we really struggled with how we were going to stage it. And I think I did something that I don't think other people have done with the play, in the ending, but, or I haven't read about anyone else doing it. But it was so funny as we were coming up with it, I was just like, God, there's still something missing. What is it? What is it? And then one of the actors said, what about that idea you had on the first day? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I had this idea the first day. Let's do that idea. And it was the right idea. So that's why it's good to
save your ideas. What was that idea?
Well, that we have a sort of dance at the end.
Yeah.
We have sort of a 3-way dance. And it's in 3 styles.
Yeah.
And then there's that moment between Otto and Ernest toward the end as well that was an early idea as well that I had sort of forgotten about.
Ernest is the character that's not part of the throuple, but he sort of represents society or what's normal, and that actor really embodies that beautifully. One of the other themes I took from it is these people are all artists. And the people that I interview on this podcast are artists or people that have chosen to pursue creative things. And there are so many times for me and probably so many people I interview where I'm like, oh man, was this the right road? This is hard. So was that a theme that you related to, the fact that these characters were artists and they decided that this is how they wanted to live?
Completely. I do think that, so many I live in a very weird world. So many of my friends are artists of different kinds, and I teach at an art school. So sometimes I forget how weird my life is compared with like a lot of people's.
Right.
But I do think there's. I tried to mention this in the program. There's something about artists that that you mix things up all the time, that you take the elements that are around you and you keep rearranging them in different ways. And so I think because that's the nature of the work, it often bleeds into the life, that there is a looseness to life in that you feel like you can play with it. You don't feel like you are walking down a very long corridor and that is your life, that you feel you can disrupt it and play with it. And I've definitely felt that in my life, even though I think I've lived much more conservatively than the 12-year-old version of me imagined. But I do feel like I could get a phone call at any moment and my life could change completely, and that would be fine. I like having different chapters, and so, yeah, in a way, I think the play is encouraging you to live your life as an artist in the sense of feeling free to move the paint around a bit if you need to, if you feel it'll make you happier.
Right, and to be true to yourself. Was there ever a time when you thought, maybe there's another road for me, or was this always this?
When I look at my bank account, yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being honest about that. No, yeah, there are moments. I get it. But then it's like what I want to do, these things that I do. You've worked all over LA. Do you have a favorite space where you just like the way it feels, the way it's set up?
God, I've kind of had 3 sort of home-ish theaters, where I have worked frequently, and I like them all for different reasons. I used to do a lot of plays at the Geffen, and I love that space. I love that neighborhood. I love the opportunities. I love the people who work there, and they produce things so beautifully there. I've really enjoyed working there. My first project was the Joan Rivers play,
right?
All those years ago.
A work in progress, which I worked with Joan Rivers for 2.5 years on Fashion Police. So I really wanted to talk to you about that play because I had seen it and I was knocked out by it. And it's a story. There's a story, and then she will tell these stories. Like, it was structured as a real play with other characters, and then she would tell these stories. And the stories were from her life, and boy, they're riveting. But I liked the other parts as well. I related to those other characters who were aspiring, who weren't already in the fame world. And I just thought it worked. I liked everything about it. And I liked that it wasn't just her telling stories. I liked the structure of it. I gather from working with her, gosh, she loved theater. When she would go to New York and then fly back to LA, before we started pitching jokes, I'd be like, what did you see? What was it like? She was the one that said, you have to go to Sleep No More. Do you know that show where you run around the mansion? Right. And when I got there, I'm like, this place is massive. I guess Joan Rivers was running all over that mansion, but she raved about it. She was like, it was so wild. So I guess what I want to talk about is she loved the theater, and she loved, I think she really wanted to be a serious actor. So what was it like to work with her in that medium of theater?
Well, I think she was a wonderful actress. I mean, I kind of wish she had gotten more opportunities to do dramatic roles. Like apparently she did one of the Neil Simon plays on Broadway. She took over for somebody. I thought she has a great ability to connect emotionally with material. And I actually dreamed someday of doing a dramatic play with her, which we never got around to doing. But right after we did that play, everything took off again for her. So she was doing so many other things, which was great. But she would come in every day, and she would talk about, she loved old movies and Turner Classic movies in particular. Right. So she would have seen the midnight film, the one at 2, and sometimes the one at 4, because she had just couldn't stop watching them, and then she would talk about them. She had such a reverence for old Hollywood and the classic stories of that time. I just thought she was an extraordinary person, and it was terrifying to work on it. It was the first play I had done at the Geffen, and she's a formidable person. But kind. But still, I was very intimidated working on it. But it was an extraordinary experience.
How did you get the gig?
I think Gil Cates just called me up. She had completed a script, and they had done a workshop of it in San Francisco, and then it was sort of a late addition to the season, and. I think they probably ask a lot of other people first. I don't know. But Gil had just seen this play I had done, this Donald Margulies play down at South Coast Rep, which is another one of these great theaters that I used to do a lot of productions at. And so he had really liked that show. And they just called me up out of the blue. And I came in, would you be at the theater tomorrow at noon to meet Joan Rivers? The answer to that is always yes. And so I was brought in for that. And and the third theater that I love is the Odyssey Theatre, because they have been so supportive of me and my craziness over the years. They've produced, it's interesting, like at South Coast Rep or the Geffen, typically I have directed plays that they've chosen for me. Mm-hmm. I think I pitched, in all my years, I pitched one play to the Geffen that they wanted to do. Otherwise, it was always plays that they came up with.
What was the play that they did that you pitched?
Oh, I wanted to do Sarah Ruhl's play, Stage Kiss, because I've done several of her plays. I love her writing. I love her sensibility. And and it's a play kind of play, like Design for Living is. It's very theatrical. So that was really, really fun. But the Odyssey sometimes comes up with an idea for me, and then sometimes, as in this case, they're curious about what I'm interested in, and they haven't done too many plays like Design for Living, and it was definitely, I think, a reach is the wrong word, but it was definitely, it's a big, complicated play, and they agreed and supported it brilliantly and gracefully. And so I love working there. Beth Hogan, who is usually my hands-on producer there, is one of the stars and saints of Los Angeles theater. everyone who loves theater in LA should know her and work with her. She's a very, very special person.
I don't work in the theater, but I get defensive when people trash theater in LA, or they'll say there's no theater. I'm like, you obviously aren't going to anything, and so shut up. But you must really get your gander up. What do you say to people that don't talk fondly about theater in LA?
Well, it's like everything, I know what you mean. You know what I mean? I go to a bad piece of theater, and then I'm like, oh my God, never again. What was I thinking?
Right.
Because there's something particularly tortuous about the theater when it's going bad, because you're trapped there. You can't just turn it off. And right. I've walked out of movies and it's this great liberating experience. But in the theater, you feel like, oh my God, everyone's watching. Because there's always two plays happening in the theater, the one everyone's watching and the one that's happening in the audience amongst all of you. And you don't want to be the villain in that piece of theater. And so you're trapped there. So I totally get it. I've seen some bad theater, but Jesus, I've seen some good theater too. And but I also think it's the nature of theater audiences that are opinionated, and I've just learned to accept it as part of the thing. People talk to me about LA theater all the time, or theater in general, and they get so angry or they get so extreme in their points of view. And I used to be like, oh my God, it's only a play, but then I appreciate this passion because it's what allows it to move forward, that people care so much that people will see something and that I've done and they'll just hate it. And it's like, I'm really glad that you hated it so passionately, because I can see how it's gotten you going. And so, and isn't that part of the experience of theater
right
too?
The worst is indifference, I would think. You would rather have them have a reaction.
I would think. I every piece I do, I'm hoping it will be transformative and people will love it. But of course, and people come to the theater with all their old ideas about, it's an old Coward play. It has to be done with British accents. And you're like, why? No one in the play mentions being British. I don't know why you would think that, or that Noel Coward has that kind of style where everything is spoken like this, and rat-a-tat-tat, and it's like, sure. And I'm sure he was really good at that. I wish I had seen him in it.
Yeah.
But I love when people reimagine plays in new ways. So, because I don't want to see this. I just, when I see the Hamlet that I've seen 100 times already, I'm just sitting there watching, clicking it off. Have they done the play within the play yet? Have they gone to England yet? What have they done the graveyard scene? You know what I mean? It just sort of like click, 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 click. And so I love anything that sort of wakes me up so that I can see it afresh
in a new way. What's your relationship to reviews? Do you read them? Do you not read them?
No, I don't read them. It's I used to, and then I realized nothing good can come of it.
That's good to know. It's good to know. Has a theater company ever come to you with a play and said, we want you to direct this, and you just didn't feel it? You just couldn't, you didn't know what you could bring to it, where you turned something down?
Yes.
And is it just because it didn't speak to you and you're just like, I'm not the person for this?
Yeah. I think that's a good description. Occasionally, I ran my own company for many years, and then as soon as we stopped producing regularly, I had a couple of years where I just said yes to everything, including Joan Rivers. Because I was just curious, what kind of artist am I going to be now? So I'll just say yes to absolutely everything. And it was a fantastic time. And I was very glad about that period. And then there are projects that, I have said yes because I love the script. I have said yes because I'm curious about the collaborators. And every now and then I have said yes for the money. But it has to be, there has to be a good reason, because it's a lot of energy and effort and mental engagement. I've never been one of those people who directs, a ton of plays a year. And I don't know how people do that, to be honest with you. Every now and then I will do 5 a year, which is, I think, a lot. And I don't know, I don't know if I could do a good job if I ever did more than that. That five is pushing it, I think. But
I'm curious, when you're doing a play, do you get paid a flat rate for directing it? Or if it's a hit and it runs a much longer, does that matter in terms of what you get paid?
Well, it depends on the contract. Typically, it is a flat fee. But if you do a play off Broadway, there are typically royalties, even for the director. And so how long it runs and how well attended it is, that will impact how much money you make on it. But for regional theaters and for Los Angeles theater, it's a flat fee. If it extends, you get a little bit more, but it's nothing to...
Sure. Don't go buy a boat.
Yeah, you're not going to buy a boat.
What was it like for you coming out of the pandemic? Because I remember in the middle of all that, we thought, is theater ever going to happen again? And then you look at Broadway now and there's a gazillion shows, it feels like it just came roaring back. What has been your experience of the pandemic and then the aftermath?
Well, my personal experience has not been the norm. I think, just from attending theater, I think theater's having a tricky time with getting the audiences back that it had before. But it wasn't just the pandemic. It was a whole bunch of things that have affected the theater, the George Floyd protest, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too. There's theater awoke from the pandemic with it's sort of in a very new place. And so it's affected how some of the institutional theaters have run. It's affected the plays that are presented. It's affected a lot of things. It's changed a lot of things. And I know that most theaters have. A lot of theaters have cut back their seasons and cut back how many performances they do a week. And I think they're still struggling to get back, or maybe they're not coming back in the same way. Now, my personal experience has been quite different from that. Because I haven't done like a ton of things since I've been back. But the first play I did when I came back was actually at the Odyssey. I did that cheery play, Henrik Ibsen's Ghosts. And I think it was one of the best-selling plays I've ever done at that theater. It kind of surprised all of us that everyone was, that so many people were interested in seeing this harrowing tragedy of a play, and then I followed it up with a piece of Sandra Singh Lowe's that we were kind of sort of workshopping, this piece called Mad Women of the West, also at the Odyssey, and we didn't do any press on it. It was strictly done with advertising and word of mouth, and the entire run sold out. The entire run, every single ticket. So it's literally the most successful play I've ever done. That was last summer.
Do you think it was word of mouth, or do you think there was something and people had an appetite for something, or it was just a great show?
I think it was a combination of those things. Plus, it had some, a wonderfully appealing actors in it, and Sandra Singh Lowe is an LA phenomenon.
Yeah.
People just adore her. So it was a combination of all those things. I don't think it was my direction, though. I hope that it helped.
Sure,
I don't think that
of course.
Told it. I just think it was a phenomenon. And now Design for a Living. We've only been open a teeny bit, but it's a lot of people are coming. It's taking off, I think, more quickly than my usual show at the Odyssey does. So, yeah. So I think it just depends on what you want to do. You know, I mean, I was shocked that these big theaters that weren't having the audiences that we were having. Why none of them picked up Sandra Singh Lo's show? You know, if you want to sell out a show, this is the show to do. But, you know, I just think theaters, I don't know. I think theaters have a lot of different agendas.
Right. There's a lot of politics within each theater and all of that stuff.
Yes. And so that's that.
Was it wonderful to be back at work, though, after that break? Was it wonderful to be back in that space?
Oh, my God. I mean, I taught through the pandemic, and a good portion of it on Zoom, and then it sort of started trickling back in person. And it's very satisfying. As I said, my students are really inspiring to me. But I feel like I am most myself when I am directing a play. It's where I feel, where my heart soars, you know, and I have just, and I think I'm especially thankful because I couldn't do it for a long time. I didn't try to do any of that Zoom theater. I stuck my little toes in it, and this is not for me. It's none of the things I love about the theater. You know, that was the interesting thing for me, because I kind of thought before the pandemic that what I loved about theater and directing was storytelling, because I do love storytelling.
Sure.
But what I realized, what I really love about the theater is that relationship between the stage and the audience. I was hungry for the audience, the weird, quirky audience, you know, and all the crazy things that happen in the audience. As I said, it's the second play that happens every night. And that's what I missed. But I also love being in the rehearsal room, you know, and sharing the discoveries that we've made in front of new people every night. It's so exciting. It's so exciting.
Once a show opens and it's kind of going, do you come back a lot and do brush ups, or like, how does that work? Or is your job done? Or does it depend?
Well, it really depends. I mean, if I'm directing in another city, quite often, I mean, I have gone from the opening night party. There's a car waiting to take me.
You're out of here. Finish that cheese and wine, and your Uber's here.
Well, no, it's not even because like I'm dying to get out of here. It's just that the theater is. They don't want to pay for a hotel for one more night,
right?
So you are sent out, and so some plays I never see after the opening. When I've done plays at South Coast Rep, that can be a tricky drive in the evening. When I drive down to rehearse the play in the afternoon, that's fine. But driving down there for an 8:00 curtain, that can be a harrowing drive. Typically, when I go to a play down there, I go in the afternoon and I have dinner and then I see the play. Yeah. So, driving in the LA area is tricky. So it depends on how far they are. With the Odyssey, now I live in the middle of the city. It takes me 20 minutes to get there. So if you come to Design for Living, I'll be there a lot, especially toward the beginning when I'm still learning things, you know, and this cast, I just love these people. Well, you saw them.
They're great.
The charming people in the world. I just like hanging out with them. I feel like I'm like Ernest. I'm not of them, but I'm hanging out with them.
Right. You get to be around them.
I just want to be around them because we have such a lovely time together. And so, I can join the throuple in my own way. I'll be around this one a lot, I think.
I love actors. I think they're like magic people. Yeah. What do you think of actors generally? Like, what's your relationship to them as a tribe, I guess?
Oh, it's dangerous because I love them so much. You know, I have a heart. Well, the ones I work with, I love. I'm very instinctive about whom I cast, and quite often, you know, there are actors who reappear in lots of my productions. It's funny. There was this opening night at the party. There was this wonderful theater goer who used to be a critic, and I don't know if he might still be a critic. I don't know, but he said, "Oh, none of your usual repertory company in this one," and it's true. There is one actor in it that I have worked with before, the actor who plays Ernest, and then there's a former student of mine in the play. But everyone else, including the three leads, are all actors who are new to me. And the minute they came in the room, I was like, this is my kind of person. This person is a nominee. Let's see how they do. Because there are people who walk in the room and it's like, no, that's not my kind of person.
And it's not just talent. It's an attitude, isn't it? It's a
I don't know. I mean,
openness.
Openness is certainly a part of it, but then there are people who are really open that just my heart doesn't leap for them.
Yeah.
It's purely instinctive. There are actors that are like, there are famous actors, that I had clearly they're very successful and clearly a lot of other people like them, but they don't make my heart leap. And so if I'm going to spend all this time with people, and I occasionally made a mistake, but not that often. I'm usually pretty good at of getting a feel for somebody, it's the spidey sense.
I like it. What about working with writers? Obviously, Noel Coward is no longer with us, but you directed one of my favorite playwrights, Justin Tanner's play Day Drinkers. I've seen all of his shows a million times. There was a period of time when he was showing at the Cast and Repertory, and I would go every night. I was like a junkie for his shows. I love them so much. So what about working with writers that are still maybe putting up a new show and you're doing it for the first time? What's that like for you?
Well, they're all very, very different. Justin, as you know, is a genius. And one of the most exciting things about Justin is when you're in the room with him. I feel like I've directed two of his plays, but I feel like I didn't really direct them. I feel like the actors sort of self-directed them and I just watched them and sort of edited things perhaps a little bit.
Which shows did you do? Day Drinkers and what else?
And Voice Lessons.
Oh, Voice Lessons. Was that with Laurie Metcalf?
Yes.
And French Stewart?
And French Stewart and Miley Flanagan, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Miley is a friend. That show is great. There's so many good ones. Anyway, yeah.
You hurt yourself laughing at that show.
Yeah.
But just to watch him, we get to the end of the scene. He stands up and he goes, okay. You don't say that line. You say that line, and then you say this afterwards, and then let's switch those two parts, and then he'll just edit it in his head right in front. He's an extraordinary writer. There are some writers who are. I've worked with so many great playwrights. I've premiered a couple of Donald Margulies's plays, a couple of Carla Ching's plays, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. I'm just trying to think of other. Anyway, I've done so many new plays. It's hard to remember them all. But all of these people work so differently, and some of them are very collaborative, and some of them they hand you the script, and that is the script that is their opening night. Joan was always rewriting. She was always coming up with new jokes. It's so funny. It's in the rehearsal room. Sometimes the jokes that we thought were the funniest were the ones that audiences had questions about.
Right.
She loved a sort of risque joke, Joan.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were a little too far.
Do you remember any of them?
I cannot say them on the radio.
Oh, I love it. All right. I probably pitched similar jokes to her at Fashion Police. What's your favorite memory of working with Joan? Is there a thing that happened or a moment that you kind of cherish?
Well, one of them was that one of these like very borderline outrageous jokes. And I laughed so hard that I think I broke something, my interclavicle muscle or something. And so I was in pain every time I breathed for a week. because of this one. So it's not a fond memory, but it's a poignant memory.
For sure.
God, what? Oh, one fun thing is, well, now all the people are dead, so I can tell this story, is I got a phone call. This is like on my day off when we were rehearsing the play. And I get a call from Gil Cates, who wants to, for insurance reasons, we need to have an understudy for Joan. For Joan Rivers performing the story of her life.
Right.
We need an understudy.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? But I guess it's just for insurance reasons.
Sure.
And so Gil calls me up and he says, could you ask her about this? And I said, no, I'm not going to ask her about that. That is your job. I am not going to ask her about that.
Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna fix that one line, and I like the scarf that you picked. And also, is it cool if we have an understudy for you? Like, how do you do that?
So he says, and you know, Gil, I adored Gil. He was one of my very favorite theater creators and producers. He said, oh, okay, I'll call her. So I'm actually walking on the beach, and it's like 1, 2, 3, ring, ring, ring. It's Joan on the phone. And she's like, but you won't believe what just happened. And I'm like, tell me. Well, Gil Cates called me up and he wants to get an understudy for me, you know? And it's like, I haven't missed a performance in 500 years. How, you know, it's like, you know, and she's like, well, if he wants to pay someone else and they can have a living wage for a couple of weeks, that's fine with me. But anyway, it was so funny. We got a wonderful person to be her understudy, but there was I think at some point Joan had a little bit of a cold and she went on, you know. Yeah. That generation, you know. Yeah.
No, for sure. Have you ever thought about living somewhere else, New York or another city, and doing what you do?
I love Los Angeles. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed how much I love it. I just love it. This is the city for me. It's funny because I grew up on the East Coast for the most part. My dad was in the Navy, so we moved around a little bit when I was very young. But I mainly grew up in Massachusetts, and it's cold there. I don't know if you know, but it's also miserable in the summer. And my aunt was a teacher in Long Beach, and we would come out and visit sometimes. We would go to Disneyland and everything. And as a little boy, I was like, why doesn't everyone live here? I don't get it. I just don't get it. And so I sort of always knew I wanted to live here. And I moved here right out of grad school. And I have always loved it. I still love it. I love the weather. I used to live on the beach, you know, well, not on the beach, a couple blocks from the beach, but
sure.
I go to the beach all the time. And I love that. I love the mountains. I love the desert. And you can have all three of them in the same day here. I love the people. I love the food. I love the city. I love this city. So it's really the city for me. So I'm not moving. I mean, I suppose if someone wanted to give me, you know, a year in Tuscany, I would say yes. But I love it here.
But New York is never called for you, like spoke to you that way.
I mean, I've done a few things in New York, and I go there and I do them, and I love New York. I mean, it's a very exciting place to be, and I enjoy it for the time that I'm there.
Yeah.
But I complain about the weather. I complain about how mean everybody is. I complain about how everything smells like urine. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot to love about New York. I mean, I love the theater can be very exciting there, and the energy of that city. I mean, most of LA doesn't have that kind of energy, but that's okay with me.
Yeah,
you know. So I am such a believer, and when I go to the East Coast and my friends there, roll their eyes and complain about Los Angeles. I'm just quiet because more for me.
More for you. I love that. I love hearing that.
I don't get to. I don't want to argue about it.
Yeah. When you're directing and the show's getting up on its feet and stuff like that, do you ever cry? Do the performances ever move you? I cry a lot when I see shows, but I'm wondering if I worked there, if that was part of my job, if I would be as quick to tear up.
Yes, it depends, of course, on the play. I mean, Ghosts has this harrowing ending, and one of the reasons I was inspired to do it, I wasn't inspired because they asked me to do it, but excited to do it, was I wanted to embed in the play this moment of my own life in the play. So when we got to that part of the play, I was actually kind of reliving this other moment of my life.
So it was really personal to you.
It was incredibly personal, that play and that production, and the dear actors that were in it. This play actually, there's a part in this play where Gilda, she's reminded of her past when the three of them were together. And she talks about how she hates the way that time and success have transformed these three people's lives in a way that has pulled them apart. And I love the way Brooke Bundy, who plays Gilda, how she connects with that moment, and the way Garakai, who's opposite her, he listens to her. I just find that very touching. I don't cry every night with that one, but some nights. But
it's a moment, yeah, that really resonates.
That moment when they're on the couch, yeah. No, it's really. I think I love it when theater cuts through the 1930s-ness of the play, the Noel Cowardness of the play, and it's just an artist talking about how painful it can be to grow up.
Right. Remember when we were young and hungry and struggling and poor and horrible, and how great that was. Yeah. It's that kind of thing. Is there a favorite part of the directing process for you? Do you love it when, this is it, when they're off book or whatever? Is there a moment where artists sometimes talk about flow state, where you're so in it that you lose track of time, or that, do you have experiences like that where it's just so all consuming in such a great way?
Well, I love casting.
Interesting.
Love meeting people and just imagining the play in different ways. I love studying the script. I love the beginning of Tech, when all of the beauty starts to, and you suddenly begin to have all of the elements, and you can really start. That's when you really feel like a painter, where you have your palette and you can start to play. And I like really fun designers who are very open. But I think if I had to say what my very favorite moment is when it goes right, is that moment. I like to spend a little bit of time with the script in rehearsal, so we really, really know it before we start staging it. And it's that kind of moment. Sometimes it's like the first staging rehearsal. Sometimes it's the second staging rehearsal where I feel like I discovered the dynamic of it, because you can think the dynamic from studying the script.
Right.
And I definitely work it out. But, quite often you're wrong. And it has to do with, and so it's like thinking with bodies, and the other actors' minds, and you start to move it around, and you're like, oh my God, that finally works. And the best moment is when you have that scene that just sort of lays there, and it's your fault as the director. The actors are saying their lines with intention, and they know what they're doing, but it's still not a scene yet,
right?
And it's like, what am I missing? What am I missing? And then you figure it out in front of everyone, and then, oh, that's what I was missing. So that is the great moment. And then you leave rehearsal and you feel like a goddamn genius.
I love that. So Design for Living is showing through August 25th. If you're in LA, check it out. It's delightful and provocative and cool and like, ooh, interesting. I like it. Here's my final thought, and it's just something that I've observed recently, and I wanted to see if you have any thoughts about it. Sometimes I go to theater, and I especially if it's really intimate, and I'm just sort of touched by, there's these people that have come here, and then there are these other people that are going to do this thing, and we're all going to pretend for a while, right? There's something beautiful about the agreement we're making, which is different than a movie. It's different from a concert. We're all just going to try to get on this boat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that idea resonate with you? I find it very moving, like that we're going to try to do this together.
It resonates with me so deeply. That's what I was talking about earlier with that there's always two plays going on. The one that we've rehearsed and are performing for you, and the one that's going on in our interaction. Because you know what it's like. You go in there and you take your seat and you look around you, and like every human being on the planet, you make some judgments about all these different people that are like, oh, this person is going to love this. This person is going to fall asleep. This person, these two are going to be arguing the whole play or whatever. And then you have your own experience of watching this, but you also are watching, is this person being warmed over to this experience? Is this person managing to stay awake? Is what is going to happen with that person's cell phone? Because I know something is going to happen with it. You know what I mean? Whatever this is, and so your own personal experience is so influenced by all these other people around you. That's why I think this play, we've had wonderful audiences for it, but I love it when there's a young audience because they get very excited by the play.
Interesting. What are they responding to, do you think?
Well, I think the freedom and the sexuality of it.
Right.
I think young people have a very different attitude, I think, toward gender roles and sexuality. It's so funny because the quote unquote hippie generation are the old people of today.
Right.
And yet sometimes it's often quite surprising how conservative the hippie generation. I mean, now, of course, everyone of the hippie generation wasn't a hippie, so I understand that. But it is sort of like sometimes people become much more conservative. I don't know if you've noticed that.
No, it's totally true. It was like, that was fun for when you're young, but now it's time to get serious. It's time to make a steady living. It's time to not be that your cute little art thing. That was fun. That sexual thing, that was fun. But it's not a life. You have to buy into these constraints. And I think this play is saying, no, you don't. No, you don't.
And Noel Coward never did.
Yeah.
He settled. Yeah.
He never settled. I think that's beautiful. And then sometimes you see a play, and I have this thing of like, if it's really good or it's moving, I want everyone to know about it. I want everyone to come see it, or they need to make a movie, or somebody needs to tape it. Like, I want to hold on to it, and you can't, right?
Yeah.
And that's your whole career, is things that you create but you can't hold. That's it. Right?
And it used to kind of hurt me that the idea of it, because you can even videotape it and it's not the same thing,
right?
But I remember with my grandfather. My grandfather was the same age as Noel Coward. They were born the same year, and I remember talking to him when he was 90 about, and I knew nothing about this. And he said, when I was in my 20s, I was in New York, and he saw, my grandfather's an Italian immigrant, English is his second language. But in the 20s, he was in New York, and he saw John Barrymore play Hamlet. And which is supposedly one of the performances of the century, and he said, I still remember everything about it.
Wow.
And it's ephemeral, and yet it's not.
Right. It feels like it doesn't last, yet it does.
It does in a way. It's not like, a movie which you can pull up and is magical in a different way.
Right.
But in a way, I think sort of what you're saying is that it's personal. It's like only you experienced it. Only you experienced that thing that you did. And maybe you got something out of it that no one else has ever gotten, and so it's just for you. And I've had that experience at the theater. I mean, my love of theater is not from directing theater, even though I love that. It's from going to the theater. That's where my love is, in seeing these transcendental productions that I can never forget, these moments that I will never forget in the theater that made me feel like I was alive.
Yeah. Do you remember one of those earlier ones? Like maybe the first thing you saw, or the first thing where you went, wow?
I don't know. The first thing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know there were like instrumental productions in my life. I remember the first time I saw the Worcester Group Company. I just thought that was the most thrilling thing I'd ever seen. The first time I saw Pina Bausch's work, I just thought, oh my God. But I'm sure that all started with the first time I saw a piece of children's theater as a child. And I probably felt that about whatever the play about bunny rabbits, I probably felt that, I don't remember those early experiences. I remember as a little kid seeing Bob Fosse's Chicago. Oh God. I always say that, Bob Fosse taught me how to snap my fingers. I was like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And then I was like, singing one of those songs in my as I was going down a flight of stairs, and suddenly I snapped my fingers for the first time, and I was like, oh, thank you, Bob Fosse.
Thank you, Bob Fosse.
I wanted to live in the Bob Fosse musical. My dream is to try to hopefully create an experience for somebody else. I mean, it touches me enormously that you've seen several of my plays. I mean, that's
I was looking at the list and I'm like, seen it, heard of it, tried to go, should have gone, didn't do it. Anyway, I just flashed on a moment that I had, like when I was growing up in a small town in Arizona, when the senior high school would do a play, there would be the elementary school would get to go to it, and we would sit.
Yeah.
And I remember one was like Dirty Work at the Crossroads, or some like I don't know, those Arsenic and Old Lace, like those shows that every high school does. And it was our cafeteria, basketball hoops. It wasn't even a proscenium.
Right.
Like it was, but I remember distinctly getting lost in it, in this story. And I'm sure they were high school actors. Like, I'm sure it was not, like Broadway caliber work, basketball hoops hanging down, whatever. I remember getting lost in the story and like having a transformative experience. So, there we go. Yeah.
I remember when I was in middle school, whatever, but high school did Kaufman and Hart's Once in a Lifetime. I don't know if you know that play, the early days of Hollywood. And I just thought, this is the most glamorous thing I have ever experienced in my life.
Yeah. So I love this conversation as a Valentine to theater. I love that you get to make so much of it. And I'm glad I got to see this show, and I look forward to coming to see many more. So thank you for this conversation.
Wonderful. What a great experience. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Bart DeLorenzo. Check out his play if you're in LA, Design for Living. It runs through August 25th at the Odyssey Theatre. You can learn about that at odysseytheatre.com, and it's theater R-E at the end. All right, so this happened. Last week I got to conduct some interviews for ABC and Disney at their summer TCA, Television Critics Association, gathering in Pasadena. And I always enjoy doing that. It's something that came out of this podcast, actually, which is really awesome. And one of the highlights was getting to talk to the Baywatch cast, because there's a new documentary about Baywatch, and they go behind the scenes and just talk about what being on that show meant to these people. So a lot of the actors came through, like David Chokachi and Carmen Electra, who looks the same. I hosted this. I wrote this award show that she hosted for Movie Line in like 2006, 2007, something like that. She was one of the hosts, and so we worked together a little, and she looks exactly the same. But that was super fun, and it reminded me of this random Baywatch story that I ended up sharing with the guy that made the documentary. So there's this store in LA called It's a Wrap. It's in Burbank, and they sell clothes that were used in film and TV shows. And when you go in there, it'll often say what show it's from, like, oh, this rack is from Young and the Restless or whatever. So in the mid-'90s, there was a Baywatch rack. And it was like, you know, things you would expect to see on Baywatch. And there was a red Speedo. And I bought that red Speedo. And I brought it home. And I don't even know if I ever wore it to a pool or anything like that. But I went to put it on, and I looked at the tag, like the size tag. And somebody had written the initials DH on the tag, as in David Hasselhoff, but also as in Dennis Hensley. So I think that Speedo was meant for me to have, and I don't even know if I ever wore it. I might not have, like, publicly. That's a lot, but I might have. I don't know. But I do remember there was a swimsuit when my book Misadventures in the 213 was coming out. There was a swimsuit issue of, like, Paper Magazine, and they were going to feature me for the book, and then I think I wore that Speedo around my neck, and it was sort of like a head and shoulders shot. Anyway, I told the story. Anyway, I forgot about that Baywatch Speedo until I started interviewing those folks at TCA's. The other wonderful thing that happened at TCA's was I got to see two people that I had had on the podcast before, actors Brian Jordan Alvarez and Stephanie Koenig, and they are kind of a comedy duo. I first interviewed Brian in 2015. He had a show online on YouTube. It was the Something Adventures of Caleb Gallo. Caleb Gallo was his character. It was this web series. It was so brilliantly funny. I knew then when I watched it, I was like, oh man, this guy has a voice. Like, the rhythms of it, it was gay, it was sexy, it was smart, it was funny, and Stephanie is in it. And they kind of do a lot of funny things together. They have this kind of Mike Nichols, Elaine May comedy team thing happening. So they were both there because they're coming out on a new show on FX called English Teacher. I believe Brian created it. He plays the title character. Stephanie's on it with him. And I haven't seen any of it, but I just can't wait. And it was so fun to talk to them. And they were like, you know, they remember doing the podcast. And Brian said that it was like the first major interview he had ever really done. And that when he's doing Press Now, people mention it or bring things up from it. So that made me feel really good. You know, it's the Dennis Anyone bump. You know, you do my podcast, and 8 to 10 years later, you get a show on FX. I think it's just what happens. It's just a phenomenon. So anyway, that was super cool. I can't wait to see that show. And that's enough for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye!